Welcome to the podcast from Headhunters Northwest. Headhunters Northwest. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach, where we take you behind the scenes into our customers' businesses. For over 20 years, Headhunters Northwest has served the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors worldwide. Listen in as we discuss the inner workings of our USA and international customers. Headhunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.
Welcome to another episode of Headhunters Northwest podcast. I am absolutely thrilled to have John Trull, the VP of Sales and Marketing at Trijicon, as my guest today. I welcome John, and I really think that we really should go through a little bit of your background because you've done so many things. And when I met you, I remember every minute. I was so nervous. Do you remember when we met?
I think we actually met face to face, wasn't it, at the SHOT Show? Yes.
It was at ATA.
That's
you
right.
had just taken that job, and I was so nervous, and you were so nice. I was so shocked that when I left, I think I was shaking like a leaf.
Why?
Isn't that funny?
Why were you nervous?
Well, because I didn't know what you looked like, and someone had to point you out, and I hadn't met you, and I thought, oh, that was silly to be nervous. And of course, it's been so fun to see you and get to know you more over the years.
Yeah, I'm so intimidating.
It can be. It can be.
Well, thank
You're
you.
not.
Thanks for having me on, and I really love getting to know you over the years. That seems like a long time ago. It really wasn't all that long ago, but
Does
that
seem
was
like
2015, 2016. So we're cruising close to a decade there. So yeah, it's hard to believe, right?
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on, and honored to be able to spend a few minutes with you. And it's interesting. I've got it's an interesting background, in terms of even just how I kind of got into this industry. I grew up, I was a lifelong hunter, fisherman, outdoors person, and, just love the outdoors. And I remember back in, it was the mid 90s, like 94, 95, when Remington moved their headquarters to North Carolina. And I was, working just out of college. I was in the textile industry and manufacturing. It's kind of where I cut my teeth. And so it's funny. Yeah, everybody thinks of me as kind of product management, sales, marketing. A lot of background there. But I actually, my origins as far as my career is in manufacturing, and so I think that's been beneficial to me. But just remember when they moved their headquarters there, I just blindly reached out to their HR department. And they're like, "No, don't need anybody like you," And so I was like, okay, well, that door's closed. But a few years later, I had a friend who was of all things, he's like the Western Regional Sales Manager for AT&T in North Carolina. And Remington was one of his accounts. And he and I shared a lot of the same passions of the outdoors. He's like, you need to go work there. And I was like, they already, they hung up on me once, but so this was like summer of 2000, I think. And I think probably their website had just gone live, and they had a careers page on there, and they were recruiting for a product manager. I read the job description. I'm like, I could probably do that. And I made kind of a deal with him that if he could at least get me in the door and with the right person, I'd buy him dinner, and he did. So I sent my resume in, and kind of the rest is history. I always joked with a lot of the senior guys at the time at Remington, Jay Bunning, Art Wheaton, Sean Dwyer, those guys are just legendary in terms of this industry. They were all in Africa when I came in the interview. So I always joke with them. I'm like, the only reason I got the jobs because you guys that knew anything about the business were gone. But, it was great for me to get into Remington. And I started out in product management, and there weren't a lot of parameters in terms of what I was supposed to do. So I just rolled my sleeves up and went to work and started working on, strategic plans, looking at, white space opportunities for the business. And, it was really apparent once I got in there that, this was August of 2000, really hadn't been a whole lot new from Remington in terms of, meaningful new products in 20, 30 years, when you really looked at it, some line extensions and things like that. But we were still trading off the legacy of the 1100, in our shotgun category. And of course, the 870 was still huge, but so for me, it was a great opportunity to get in and just start working hard. And I really kind of embedded myself with the manufacturing team because I felt like really to do that job well as a product manager, I really needed to understand, how the products were made, to know everything about the process. And in doing so, I, learned a ton of, about firearms manufacturing, everything from shotguns, rifles, handguns, ultimately modern sporting rifles, the gamut. So really understood those factories inside and out, understood the processes. And, ultimately, when I guess it was about 2012, I moved into the SVP GM role for the firearms business at Remington. I was pretty well versed, I think, then operationally. And of course, having the roots in manufacturing really helped. So for me, it was great because, I could sit in front of a customer, and based on what they were describing, I could really visualize, and I could give them an answer pretty much on the spot, whether it's something we could do or whether we couldn't do it, in terms of, whether it's a special makeup product or something like that. And so really understanding the constraints of those factories and, ultimately, really helped me in terms of my career as it evolved. So,
well, your career grew a lot in Remington. I mean, you did climb the ladder there.
It's funny, I've heard that before, climb the ladder, but what was really interesting, if I kind of reflect back on it, for the most part, the doors that opened for me at Remington really were doors that weren't there. It was doors that were built and created. And, I tell people that, I get, people within my team or, here or other places, they're like, well, how can I grow? And I'm like, well, you grow as we grow. And as we grow, that creates other opportunities, and it creates doors that didn't exist before. And it creates new opportunities because when we build things to a certain point, it takes more people, it takes more help to carry the torch. And so, a lot of those opportunities that opened up for me at Remington were opportunities that were created just by growth. And, I think that's a very important, point for people to understand. In general, this industry is relatively small. I mean, we think of it, in our lens, it's a big world out there. But, when you look at it globally in terms of large companies, really large companies, there's some really large companies out there that probably have, a market cap the size of our entire industry, so it's, or more. So, from that standpoint, those opportunities, it's not like, it's not like General Electric or something where, there's these, destined paths for people to go down as they kind of learn and mature as managers. And so a lot of our opportunities really in this industry come from, really rolling your sleeves up, going after it and creating opportunities for growth. So it's, I tell people, never underestimate, how impactful, your actions are in terms of not only your actions in terms of how they relate to the company and its growth, but your personal growth as well. It's really important, for people to.
Don't you think that's saying yes, though? When you're handed a challenge, which I know you have been on many roles you've taken, and there isn't a roadmap, and you say, yes, I'll figure it out. I mean, that it does take being brave and being resourceful.
Brave, resourceful, and really trusting your instincts. That's something that I tell people, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. I'm not saying, go off and just, think about it long and hard, because sometimes things, if it doesn't smell right, it probably isn't right. And so I tell people, you have to trust your instincts and trust your gut too.
Yeah. Now, when you left Remington after that period of time, which was a lot of change and growth, then where did you go next?
So I left Remington. It was the end of 2014. I went to work for Hunter Specialties in the hunting accessory category. That was a tough one.
And that's when I met you.
Yeah. You talk about challenges.
Yeah.
And I will go back to, about what I said about trusting your gut. We had actually, I guess I can say this now because it's so long ago and companies have gone away, but
right.
We actually had looked at acquiring Hunter Specialties when I was at Remington. They were owned by the bank at that time, highly distressed, just, in really on the ropes and probably, months, if not weeks away from just being completely insolvent. And, we looked at them at the time and I kept struggling with, how do you grow it? How do we really grow this? And, I late in 2014, I was introduced to a PE firm that had acquired them, and they put together a really, I would call it aggressive plan, because I kept trying to do the math on, how much of that business used to rely solely on Walmart. A lot of that business had gone away. The retailers had moved, a lot of the tree stand hooks and burlap and things like that, just commodity items that anybody could source themselves from wherever.
Yeah.
And many of them had done that. And so, for me to say, how do you take something that's, $24-25 million with an average selling price of about $7, and meaningfully grow that? I had some concerns, but, these guys had put together a pretty aggressive, plan, but, it just didn't come together. And at the end of the day, it was no fault of their own. I mean, just the market wasn't great during that time.
Yep,
period.
I remember.
Hunting accessory category. Archery was tough, and we were not, we were that kind of middle of the road, entry level to mid level, price point in the hunting accessory category. And, a lot of the business that hunters had relied on for many, many years was now being sourced direct by a lot of these retailers. And it was really, really a tough environment. And so, that was when I talk about, trusting your instincts and trusting your gut, for me, looking back on it, and I don't regret it, because I think every opportunity that you have, you win some and you lose some. And what's most important coming out of those situations is, what did you learn? How can you improve, and how do you grow, based on it? And so I joke with people sometimes, and I've been in some pretty highly distressed situations at Remington twice. The second time was really tough. And, Hunter Specialties was another one. And the most valuable thing I think I've learned about being in those really highly distressed environments is just making sure you don't get there, because companies oftentimes fall into, and we see this in our industry, we have peak times, and we have, and it's not a surprise, when the business softens up, people act like they're shocked. None of us are really shocked. We know it's going to happen. It's just, we're an event driven industry sometimes, and, it's somewhat cyclical. And generally speaking, when you have those lulls, if you were to just kind of graph that, take the peaks and valleys out of it, it's a pretty nice, steady, compound annual growth rate, for our industry and for the subsequent companies there. And so, it's easy for companies to fall into a trap, I think, sometimes of, things are so great, what goes up stays up, and they overextend themselves. They start adding a lot of fixed costs to the business. They bring in more people. They start expanding capacity that, if you step back and look at that and say, can we maintain that capacity in an average market, in a typical market? And so, companies just get themselves in a hole cash wise, from a working capital standpoint. They just tie up all their cash and, bring on more operating expense. And, it's really, having some fiscal discipline in terms of managing, the business through what we know are going to be peaks and valleys in this industry. And so for me, that was a really, a valuable lesson. For me, it was a great experience. It's one of those ones that one just didn't work out. And, it isn't because of any one person or any one thing. It was just, a series.
But it helps you fine tune your skills for now. Look at how far you've come in your career compared to then. You make decisions differently now because of that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you really take a long pause and you look at, things that maybe once upon a time didn't really concern you so much, in terms of looking at inventory or, operating expense. I'm a firm believer in, I would rather us stretch ourselves in terms of, human capital than to bring someone in, or people, a group of people in, only to, be in a period 18 to 24 months later where you've got to make some tough decisions. And, you're messing with people's lives when you do that. And if we take that for granted, it's just not the right thing to do. And so I would rather stretch ourselves, and to the point where we're about to bust at the seams in terms of being able to, before, and really make sure that if we need to add headcount, that we know, why we're adding it, and is it going to be sustainable long term.
Yeah, I think the people part of our industry, there are some very recognizable brands that they have the reputation of caring for their people, and maybe they're not as racy and maybe they're not as quick to market with new things, but they've proven they're not a flash in the pan, and their tenure for their employees is long term, sometimes to a fault. And sometimes that's okay because you really don't lose all of that knowledge base when we have companies that are quick to make decisions and a flash in the pan. Then you lose all of that knowledge base and you have to start over every time. And it's very expensive and it's very hard on any sort of product development or any sort of consistency.
Yeah, consistency and steady and being very meticulous and calculated in terms of how you make decisions is really important. And you're right. When you look back at some of the brands in our industry that have continued to do well and thrive, they may not be the flashiest, but they're just steady. They're steady and they're consistent. They have a plan that they're operating to, and they stick with the plan. And if an opportunity, they have the ability to capitalize on it because they've got the dry powder to do that, right? They have the cash to be able to take advantage of an opportunity without leveraging themselves with a bunch of debt to be able to acquire something or make a strategic move. And so I think that level of discipline, we see that in a few companies in our industry, and they may not be the flashy whiz bang thing of the day, but they do very, very well. And, that's important, when it comes to your stakeholders, your shareholders and the employees of your company. It's really a big deal.
So your leadership, I wasn't sure how I wanted to talk about this, but a lot of people who listen to this are going to know you from our industry, and you have a tremendous following. And I have been around you enough, and the people who've worked for you, who would happily work for you again any day of the week. Your leadership is whatever it is you're doing, people love to work for you and they love to be around you. You have a great sense of humor and you support their growth, but I think also hold them to task. I know there have been times where I've called you for a reference based on someone that I'm working with, and you're very good about saying, well, I think these are areas to watch or areas they're working on. I don't know how far they've gotten, and they're very on point. So how would you describe your leadership style?
Player coach. It's probably the way I would categorize it. But to the point of, and this was something that I struggled with early on in my career, is giving people enough leeway to grow. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do when you look at something and how you would do it yourself and you just go, I can get this done much quicker. And I think a lot of us fall into that trap. But, you find yourself, you do that and all of a sudden, everybody's coming to you with everything and it's not helping you and it's not helping the company and it's certainly not helping them. So, I try to, I'm never going to ask people to do something that I'm not willing to do myself. So, I will gladly roll my sleeves up and get to work right alongside you. If you need help, guidance, perspective, that's something that I'm always going to be there as a resource to offer, because, ultimately I think we as managers become better and better at our jobs because if we have a great team around us and if we can build those teams up and empower those people with the confidence and the skills that they need to be successful, then ultimately it frees us up to focus on other things and let the people do their jobs. And that's hard for a lot of people to do, is to let people do their jobs because, they might mess it up. Yep. They're going to. Something's going to get messed up. And those are great opportunities because, I believe in I think that, as leaders that we need to be compassionate as well, because people, when you scream and yell at people all the time when they make a mistake, everybody makes mistakes. I've made mistakes. the guy that's yelling at me has made mistakes. We've all done that. And, when you do that to people, you get less out of them, I think, in terms of what they're capable of, because they become more focused on not screwing up than being successful. And, look, and being compassionate doesn't necessarily mean not holding people accountable, but I've really found that, if you use those opportunities as teaching moments and, you point out in a professional and meaningful way, okay, let's talk about what you did and why it didn't work. What I've found is you start to see a lot more self-account because that person's not so much worried about getting their butt chewed out. And they know that it's an opportunity for them to kind of self-evaluate, look at what they did. And a lot of times, I'll have folks come to me and say, hey, look, we did this. I did this. It didn't quite work out. Here's why it didn't work out. Here's what we're going to do to make sure it's not going to happen again in the future. They grow, and you get a better work product at the end of the day from the organization standpoint. And so, I try to be a mentor. Look, sometimes you have to make some of those tough calls, but I would say majority of people want to do a good job. They want to do the right thing.
Well, you don't have to hire good people. I mean, in my experience, because two of them that I know of that I've worked with, one is effectively a CEO, he's the general manager, and the other one is a chief revenue officer. And these people have very different personalities, but yet somehow you're able to do that. I just think you should quit what you're doing and become a recruiter. Much better at it than me. No, but your team now. So right now you're working with Trijicon, as we mentioned. And your leadership has come into play again because you guys have just gone to a model where you've hired an entire sales force internally. And that's a big decision. And it's a tough decision. You've just created more work for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a tough decision. And it's one of those that, it's really easy to sit back and go, what happens if it doesn't work? Right. Everybody's going to ask that question, because there's this little, kind of security blanket that, you've got, and look, by the way, our rep group that we were working with, I can't say enough good things about those guys. They represented Trijicon well for many, many years. And it's a tough job, working in that space.
We're very fortunate to have some very, very talented and very good rep groups in our industry. And they're made up of incredible people. But this is not uncommon. And they know this, where companies evolve and change and they move on and they grow the next company and they bring exposure to companies that could never even begin to have an internal sales force.
That's very true. I mean, for companies that have a great product, maybe they just don't have the capital to bring on, a big direct sales team. The rep groups, the agencies are great for that. And these guys did a really good job for Trijicon for many, many years. But I think we had kind of grown to the point where, our line was much broader than it was, 10, 15 years ago. And so, it really, really required that full-time, person to be focused just on our product and our brands and our partners. And so it's always a tough decision. But it's if you prepare, and I don't think you can over prepare for something like this. And so it all goes into how much planning and preparation you put into it. And our team did just a phenomenal job. Gary Sweet, he's our senior director of sales, did a phenomenal job with his team of mapping out territories. Our human resource team was top notch in terms of, getting the right people to go out and fill, 15, 16 positions relatively quickly that have specific geographic needs and specific skill sets is not an easy thing to do. And our team just did a phenomenal job. And then, the other aspect of that is really taking the time to train these folks and give them the tools in their toolkit to be successful. And, our sales team did a really fantastic job of putting together a training program for our team the first half of guys that we've hired have already been through that training. We're about to take on the second half and bring those folks in and put them through an intensive, sales 101 training, and then spend several days with the product managers, really getting them up to speed with, the features and benefits of our products, how to sell our products against our competitors' products. And they did a really, really nice job. And you know what? When everybody gets nervous, we haven't missed a beat. If anything, we're in a better position, this year than we were last year. We're really fortunate. And we always, we identified, here's some risk, but the upside on that far exceeded any of that risk. And so we I don't want to say that we were fortunate, because I think we planned to be successful, and the plan's working.
Well, and growth doesn't often come without some sort of risk. And if you mitigate your risk with your planning and training, like you've described, I think that's very hard for companies to do, because you're stretched so thin and everybody's demanding, and customers internally and externally. And I think it's great for Trijicon, and I'm thrilled. I certainly own a couple of Trijicon's optics, and they're wonderful product. And I just think it's great when you can bring more people in and do a better job of explaining your product to those you're selling to.
Yeah. And, I think the risk thing, the calculated risk is, that's a big point. I usually tell, and some of the folks that, that have worked with me in the past probably heard this before, but, if what we're doing doesn't make us a little bit uncomfortable, we're probably not doing enough, because it's so easy to just kind of fall back into that. Well, it's just easier to let things just kind of be as they've always been. And so I think we don't grow unless we push ourselves outside of our comfort zone sometimes. That doesn't mean...
But it's a good reminder. I forget that sometimes. I really do. I'll try to remember that, because it is hard. You get to the point where you're like, I can't do one more thing.
Yeah,
and then, right. Well, now, as we wrap this up, I kind of wanted to see if you had any advice for your younger self. A lot of people want to get into our industry, and you didn't give up. You applied, and then you found another way that somebody knew somebody. So, how could we give advice to people who want to be fortunate enough to get to work in this industry? Because I just think it's a huge blessing. The people are incredible.
I agree. I mean, it's such a great, I mean, even the folks that we compete with fiercely, you've seen it before. We're so, it's such a tight knit group of people, and, even our competitors, we can be friendly with those folks, and I don't think you see that everywhere. But, I would say, some advice for folks that are looking to get into the industry is, really understand, what you want to do, why you want to do it. I would say, prepare yourself, put yourself into a position to where, you're an attractive candidate. So, take the time to research the different companies that you're interested in, to learn about them, and then find out, whether it's through LinkedIn or other places, network. And, it's sometimes, those, we open up some of those doors and just through networks and contacts. And, and I would say, be patient. The jobs don't always, they're not, sometimes they don't come up as frequently as we'd like to, but, go to, those companies' websites. We've got Trijicon has a careers page that, I encourage folks to visit, and because, if we have a job, it's going to be posted there, typically. So to go to those companies' websites and look at what's out there. And, I would, just go in with a plan. If you do get an interview, prepare yourself to be successful. Go in with a plan, speak to that plan, and, don't be afraid to sell yourself. Don't oversell yourself. Don't put yourself out there and, from the standpoint of that, it all, because you don't, particularly as a new person starting out in a career. But I've also found it to be really impactful to, just share your passion and why it's important to you, and how how this is something that you really wanted to do. I think, for me, that's a big selling point when I talk to people. It's like, do they really want to be here? Are they really interested in this job, or are they, interested in, a bigger title, potentially a bigger paycheck, or just trying to get out of the job that they're in currently. So, really
help right then for solving that problem. And if they can get in there and prove themselves and help you solve that problem, then as the company grows, the doors will open.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, I tell people, don't force an answer. When someone asks you a question in an interview, if you need clarification, ask some clarifying, questions. Don't just necessarily try to wing it. Take the time to absorb it. And if you don't know, say you don't know. Don't make something up, because chances are the person that's asking the question already knows the answer, and you're not gonna get that past them. But so that's some advice that I would give for people that are looking into getting into the industry. And I would say, for folks that are kind of just starting out their careers in general, just don't underestimate the value of hard work. I mean, nothing. We all hear the overnight success stories, and those are always told by someone who wasn't there. The ones that were successful spent many nights on those success stories. So, it just, those things typically don't just fall out of a tree.
We don't all start out in the job we dream of. Right?
That's right.
You don't, even being self-employed, I didn't start out at working on the jobs I dreamt of. You have to work hard, and sometimes you have to put in the experience, and maybe it's not your dream job, or that particular project isn't your favorite, but you will learn something from it. Even the hard ones, even the things about what not to do, you'll learn. And that's valuable for where you are in your career now. And it certainly is what brings experience.
I tell my kids that all the time. I'm like, your dream job is probably not your first job, but one of those experiences is a building block. It strengthens your mind. You learn different things, and it just helps you grow as a leader, and take none of those things for granted, and take everything as an opportunity to learn something from it. That's absolutely great advice. It is how we grow.
You remember what your first job was? Like, for mine was, of course, I was babysitting when I was a kid, but my first job that I really remember, and I just hated it, was putting alfalfa sprouts in little plastic containers for the store, right? The other day I bought some alfalfa sprouts, and it just brought it right back to me. And it's such a weird job, but I was cold all the time, and I just hated that because it was in a refrigerator. But I learned a lot because you had to go to work every day, and you had to do it anyway.
Yeah, I started working. I guess my first job was I was 16, in high school and part time, and I was working as a cashier at Bradley's department store.
Is that right?
Yeah. So.
Well, you learn a lot about people, don't you?
Actually, it was a bag boy at Kroger. That was my very first. Yeah, that was my very first job. So.
Well, you learned how to bag groceries the right way then. That's when they taught you how to bag groceries, probably.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. So I don't mind the self-checkout because I'm already trained.
Exactly. I'm going to remember that. Well, thank you very much, John. And we will include the careers page link for Trijicon on this podcast, wherever it's posted, in the comments or wherever it's appropriate. But I really thank you for coming, and thank you for doing this. I know you're so busy, but it's such a pleasure, and I'm really honored, and it's just always fun to see you. You're such a really outstanding people person and an amazing leader. So I look forward to many years of seeing you at trade shows.
Well, they'll be coming up again soon.
That's right.
That's for sure. But I really do appreciate the time, and it's been great being on this podcast with you. And look forward to seeing you soon.
Well, we really appreciate it. That's it for another episode of Headhunters Northwest podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Headhunters Northwest podcast. Specialized recruiting, specialized approach. You can reach out at headhuntersnw.com or call 605-600-1709. Join us again next week as we look behind the curtain into the global defense, small arms, and shooting sectors. Headhunters Northwest, finding you the best heads for business.